Thanks for tuning in. Occasionally in our short courses, some interesting questions get posed. In one of the most recent runnings of our Essential Safety Measures short course, a couple of very interesting questions were posed by some of the participants, and we really do our best to constantly stay on top of the most recent information and important information for strata managers. So to resolve and investigate further some of those items that have been raised, I'm meeting today with Peter O'Day from Fire and Wire. Peter's got 30 years experience in the fire safety industry, working in the essential safety measures space. Thanks for coming along today, Pete.
Pleasure.
So let's just dive straight in, so we're not wasting the viewers' time.
Yep.
The first item that was raised during one of the most recent sessions was a question from a manager around a block plan. So my understanding is that a block plan is a document that summarizes where the equipment is located for putting out the fire. Is that the most simple way I can put it? Is that right?
I'd say more it's the hard fixtures such as hydrants, hose reels, sprinklers that are actually in a building that will show anybody that's set out who rolls up to that building and mightn't know it, and what equipment exists in that building.
Yeah. So, and because for me, it immediately, what comes to mind initially is, Fire Rescue Victoria showing up because there's a fire and they need to know where the equipment is. But I guess there's more to it than that, isn't there? Because of course you have the contractors that come out and service the equipment. It just gives an easy guide to see where everything is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the fire brigade's going to go to if they've got a booster connection covered on site, that's the first place they'll go to, and hopefully the block plan will be in there.
Yeah. And the angle of that question that I had, and I'll put up an example of a plan right now. A manager gave an example that they were required to provide a block plan for a building that didn't have one. In this specific case, the municipal building surveyor from council actually served a building notice to say you are required to obtain one of these plans because there wasn't one in place. And you can see on the screen here, this is quite a large sample that you can see, which is for a building in or near the Melbourne CBD. And you can see all the equipment there. And that sort of leads on to the main question that was coming at me was, okay, we've had a requirement to obtain a block plan for this building. How does it work if, for example, our essential safety measures contractor says, we think it's a good idea that you get one, but is that a requirement or is it just more of a best practice guide?
Well, it's more of a best practice guide, I think, but depending on the size and, the layout of the building, I think if someone's recommending something, it's probably best to put it in. They take a bit of drawing up these plans, and it's a good thing to have on your building if I'd say the equipment needs to be recognised and recognised quickly.
Yeah, and thinking once again from that practical point of view, if you didn't have a block plan, there's a fire and the firefighters show up without this, they're just going to be hunting around for the equipment ultimately, aren't they?
Correct.
Yeah.
They're looking to hook up to the nearest hydrant to the fire.
Yeah.
And this is what the block plan shows.
Yeah. And committees, I imagine, would pose a counter question when the manager comes through with this item saying we recommend a block plan. I guess I'm looking at the push comes to shove angle. When must an owners corporation do it, and when can they make their own judgment? And I would have thought if you get a building notice from council, unless you want to go to court about it, it's really not worth fighting about. You should just. Would you agree? I think that would be my position and my guidance to my clients. I'd say it's a really good idea unless you're going to basically be going and spending money at the buildings appeal board to try and fight off the recommendation. It's probably just not worth the money.
Yeah. Usually you'll have to hire a building surveyor or a building engineer to fight that notice, which can be actually more costly than actually just doing the block plan.
Isn't that? And that's the way up, isn't it? And you could say, well, rightio, it's going to cost us $10,000 in professional and legal fees. How much is it to actually get the block plan? So if the building order was just for the block plan, sure, you might be staring down the barrel of $2,000 or $3,000 as a figure plucked out of the air. But if you wanted to fight about it, you could end up going down those legal pathways and be spending a lot more money and come out the other side still maybe having to do it without anything to show for it.
Right.
So, Sometimes, and you're weighing up the pros and cons. There is a benefit to having these plans in place from a safety point of view, so that the firefighters can do their job more efficiently, get to those hydrants more quickly because they know where they are. Fire Response Victoria come out and say, we recommend you put X and Y in place. If it was me as a member of the owners corporation, if the fireys are telling me to do it, because if you don't, their next port of call is probably on the phone to the municipal building surveyor at council, and then you have to do it. So I was just more thinking, if you had a recommendation, let's say there's a false alarm in a building, they come out because someone's burnt their toast, and while they're there, that example earlier, they notice you don't have a block plan, and the head firefighter says to the chairperson, you really need to get a block plan in place. My gut feeling in that situation is you really should move, especially if it's coming from someone who's fighting the fires. Have you got sort of anything to add on to that?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, it's an inexpensive fix. It's something that's going to benefit everybody and everybody. I think when it comes to building notices from the council, you have to weigh up costs. Now, what are they asking us to do, and how much is that going to cost us? And do we really have to do it? And if you think not, and it is expensive, then you go down the, the building surveyor engineer track to fight the notice.
The one piece I would add to that is also consider what the benefit is of the upgrade works that are required. I went through that situation many years ago where a client with a very old building had a very detailed building notice served that required a nearly 100-year-old building to do lots and lots of different upgrades. And in the end, those owners actually said, if there was a fire, it genuinely would be a danger. So they put in new detection. They upgraded plaster to fire-rated plaster in some of the ceilings. They put in emergency lighting and exit lighting and a fire indication panel. This is an old Art Deco building. If they went through and fought, it might have cost them tens of thousands or more in legal fees. And they just said, look, we're going to have a safer building at the end of the day. So it's something you can't discount that factor at the end of the day.
Yep. But it's, I've seen a classic example is now the cladding issue in Victoria, especially. I'm finding that the surveyors, the municipal surveyors, are coming through and checking all the essential safety items in a building and issuing notices of defects or shortfalls for buildings that have been standing there for maybe 20, 30 years, whether there had been an advantage to get them done or not. There was one there where they wanted to move a fire hose reel a metre. And
you need permits for that, don't you? To actually complete the work, you need to get permits.
Correct, but it was going to be so expensive. So they employed a building surveyor, and that was one thing that was knocked off their list that they had to do.
And with the situation I referred to earlier, there was negotiation. Some of the items that they requested, we had a fair negotiation. We said, look, there's 15 items here. Items 1 to 11, we're just going to do them. Items 12 to 15, there was either an adjustment or a scaling down or a reason we could justify why. No further work was required. So I guess you can have a mix of the two, doing some compliance work and negotiating some other ones on a fair basis. One of those other little niggly questions that came up in the session, a strata manager had a response from an ESM contractor, and they said, well, we think this is supposed to be a fire door, but there's no tags. Normally on a fire door, there'll be a little tag somewhere in the door that will tell you, Australian standard and what kind of fire door, and maybe it will mention the FRL rating for the door, but there's no tags. So the manager posed the question, how do we know? If you were to look at the door, would you know it's a fire door?
Yes, I could look at the characteristics of the door and the door frame. When they're manufactured to a certain standard, and that's when the tags are put on. So they're individual tags for individual doors, and they're all pretty much numbered. Those tags go missing. Yes, it is a problem because they're the identification of the doors, and they tell you what's what, and the fire rating, like you say. But
is there a way to test categorically? So let's say no one knew. So the painter might have taken the tags at some point in the past. It might be a new set of owners in a building and a new manager as well. If they actually said scientifically, is there a way that we can actually test? So to absolutely without any doubt whatsoever, say this is or isn't a fire door? Is there a way that you can test that?
Yeah, take a core sample of the door by drilling into the door,
Okay.
taking some of it off to the laboratory to get tested to see what fire rating it has,
Yep.
and then filling that hole back in with fire retardant material.
Would that exceed the cost of buying a fire door?
I don't know. Fire doors are very expensive.
Okay.
And
That is an option. It is an option.
Well, I've never had anyone sort of go that sort of path before.
Yeah. I have heard of cases. I've heard of a building that had a building notice from council because there were doors that should be fire doors that weren't fire doors.
Right.
And I can just foresee if you had that exact situation, you get a building notice from council. Council says this door is supposed to be a fire door. There's no tags on it to clarify that it is. I guess in that situation, testing might be your only option, because I imagine council, you could look at the door and say it has all the hallmarks of a fire door, but if council said in return, well, we want this categorically confirmed,
yeah,
you'd have to get it tested, wouldn't you?
100%.
Yeah.
100% get it tested. Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks for coming by and helping clarify these items today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And,
I hope it did clarify for you and didn't make it more complicated for people.
No, it was great. And obviously, any specific queries, contact me or Peter O'Day at Fire and Wire. And thanks for watching. Bye.